Hello, thank you all for joining us today. We are going to discuss a live Ask the Expert session on a session that you may have just tried to watch, and we'll talk about that in a second, but all of the great Azure AD innovations that we introduced today to help you strengthen your resilience. So I am your host, Adam Harbour. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to get to the interesting stuff. First and foremost, respect everybody, appreciate everybody. I'm sure you've seen the code of conduct a bunch of times during this event, so that extends to all of your peers watching this session and all of our awesome speakers today. Note this session will be recorded, so be mindful of anything that you do share in here. We have a crack team behind the scenes, both our on-camera experts and a bunch of Azure AD folks as well. They're going to be here to help answer your questions. We can see all of them. We'll publish them, so feel free. Don't have to spam your same question a bunch of times. If you send it, we'll see it, and we'll do our best to get to it in the 30 minutes that we have. And so we can't hear you, but we can see what you type in the chat. So go ahead and use that chat box to ask all the questions that you have. We'll be able to see them. We'll publish them all to you. And then what's really helpful for us, if you give that thumbs up to questions that maybe you have as well, then we get to see the concentration of stuff that's the most burning. We're going to do our best to fit in as much as possible in those 30 minutes. And then we'll have some awesome links to share afterwards to help you have an amazing Microsoft Ignite. So as I said, I'm Adam Harbour. I'm part of the Azure AD product marketing team. We've got three folks here with me today. We have Tark Dawood, who is representing our service resilience. We have Sarah Handler, who's representing our resilience of identity security. And then we have Steve Ball, who's going to be talking to us today about all the exciting stuff that we're working on towards integrating CloudKnox into our platform. So just a high level view, and first and foremost, I want to say for those of you that are with us trying to watch Joy's session, thank you for one, coming to the session, two, sticking with it. We apologize for the visual quality that we had during that session. The good news is if you go now and watch it on demand, and please do, because it's a really cool session. If you do go watch it on demand, great crystal clear quality, and you can go back and watch all of those demos. But if you did at least get to hear the session, we talked about those three kind of core platforms. So what are we doing as part of a shared model to provide you a resilient identity platform, some of the investments we're making there. Hey, security, attacks, advanced threats are top of mind. We hear you all the time. It's a very tough time to be an identity professional in this world. And so there's a lot we've built into the platform to help you defend and protect against that. And then as you're expanding, or as you're defending against these advanced threats, you know, they're going to go off and attack your ever expanding attack surface. And that includes a multi-cloud approach, which you've heard that many of you have taken. So as part of our acquisition that we announced in July as CloudKnox, to help you understand some of that escalated privilege that's happening into identities across multiple clouds, into non-human identities as well. We're doing some work, and really excited to show you more work that we'll have in the future towards integrating that CloudKnox product into Azure AD. Showing this here for you, but we're going to mostly look at this as we get to it after. But we did have a slew of things to announce. What I'd recommend right now, if you do want to understand some of the deeper context and maybe even help you shape some of your questions, one, that Joy session, which, like I said, is now crystal clear. You can go to at ak.ms/ignitejoyc2021. And then if you want a little bit of deeper context on the features themselves, you can go to ak.ms identity fall 2021, and that is the blog which has all of these features summarized in that. So we'll go ahead and look at this again towards the end of the session, but we got 25 minutes to start tackling some questions. So while you go ahead and get your questions in, I'm going to start with Tark, right? So we started our session with resilience, super important for our customers. Can you give us some ideas? You know, Nadeem talked a little bit about backup authentication service and also cell-based architecture, but you can talk a little bit broader on some of those major investments that we've done in Azure AD over the past year.
Yes, thank you, Adam. So I think, as Nadeem mentioned, we've been working super hard at a few kind of vectors. The main ones are basically safe deployment, which is basically how change replicates throughout the system, recognizing that change is the #1 factor that causes outages, generally speaking. Usually computers, if you put them on a path to do something, they keep doing it. So usually things break when you introduce change, whether it's configuration change or code change and so forth. So we've done a lot of investment around improving our safe deployment practices across the stack. So now our core authentication stack, which is the one in your way, in your user's way when they're going to stuff, is now fully following the best practices of safe deployment across Azure and Microsoft. So this is where all premium services of Microsoft adhere to this kind of code of conduct. The second set of investments is around cell-based architecture, as you mentioned, which is around basically fault isolation in the layers below us. So this is we're not introducing code change, but underneath us, a data center goes down, a network cable goes down, a network provider disappears, a DNS outage. How do we contain the fault as much as possible so that it doesn't replicate and cripple a bunch of customers at the same time? And so that's where cell-based architecture comes in. Specific numbers we have is that we now, our service, instead of being four big chunks of Azure AD services, for example, in a given region, like in the Americas, it is now a bunch of tiny cells that are serving customer traffic. This way, if any underlying component goes down, only no more than 1% or 2% of customer traffic is impacted, and it can immediately redirect to any of the other cells. And now the other cells don't have to take on a bunch of traffic. It's just a small fraction. And so that's what we're doing with cell-based architecture. And then the third one is the backup authentication service, which is basically, even if Azure Active Directory is trying its very best to stay up and running, what if, for whatever reason, whether Azure Active Directory is having an outage or my client can get to it, or there's a DNS problem between us and them, how do I protect against that? And so we basically built an entirely decorrelated STS, as same code as our primary STS that's running in different infrastructure. And between them, there's a shared cache of tokens that allow the backup authentication service to continue to continue authentication when a client cannot get to the primary Azure Active Directory instance. So we're planning, even though we're not just betting the farm on the front door that Azure Active Directory will never go down, but even if there is some kind of problem, that there's technology in place to act as a catch-all and cover the customers in this case. We're constantly adding to that. So where we started the year, the backup authentication service was able to cover about 60% of a customer's Microsoft traffic. Now it's able to cover more than 80% of a customer's Microsoft first-party apps traffic. And we're obviously planning to expand it to third-party apps, to your own custom line of business apps that you write, and so forth, so that you have the most coverage possible.
Great, thank you, Tarek. Sir, a question for you. Joy talked a little bit at the beginning of the security section around Nobelium, and we announced a lot of features, but for customers that are specifically thinking about ways to detect or combat Nobelium types of attacks, what would you say in terms of framing all of those features we had today, or what is that particular feature set that they should be looking at?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. Nobelium has been a pretty high profile actor, right, over the last year-ish. But Nobelium is not the only one, right? We know that there are a lot of persistent threat actors out there that we need to make sure that we're all protected from. So right now, there's really two main ways that we suggest approaching this on the identity side. The first is better prevention, right? So you can use conditional access, including some of the new features that we just released around filtering, to better hone your policies so that you have better coverage, right? If you don't have MFA, turn it on. That's always the first step. But there's additional things you can do with conditional access to better protect your identities, specifically workload identities, right? That's a brand new feature that we're super excited for folks to take advantage of, because those are increasingly being used to gain access. It's not just user identities, it's also our service principals that are being used to gain access to your organization and to persist in your organization. So setting up new policies to target service principals is a great start, but we know that compromise is going to happen, right? We can have the best defenses, but it will happen, right? And to a certain extent, how quickly are you going to find out that it's happened and have the tools in front of you to be able to remediate? So in that front, we're doing a lot of work on the Azure AD identity protection side to create new detections. So two specific new ones that we've had in response to many different attacks we've seen recently for token theft. So that's anomalous token and unfamiliar sign-in properties for session cookies. Both of these look at non-interactive sign-ins, which is something we previously hadn't really done before, to see if there's evidence that a token was stolen and is now being replayed maliciously. So make sure that you're actually looking at your risk detections and that you have policies set up to automatically block or remediate a user when their credentials have been compromised. So those user risk policies that we've talked about for many years are even more important now that we have more detections to make sure that we have the most holistic and accurate user risk score.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Steve, on the CloudKnox front, demo was awesome. And again, excited. Hopefully folks get to go back and watch that. Really neat focus on scenarios that folks can do across their clouds. We want to use CloudKnox today, get us these capabilities today. So what would you say for customers that are curious about leveraging it today, ahead of any integration that we have? What's some guidance that we can give them?
Awesome. Great question, Adam. And for everyone curious about CloudKnox, the good news is that the CloudKnox multi-cloud solution for reducing the permissions gap is still available and will be available for a long time. You can try it. You can go do a risk assessment today, and we will help and support your adoption of the CloudKnox product just the same way it was before the acquisition. And so I would highly encourage anyone who is interested in or curious after they saw Balaji's demo today, go try it out. It's easy to get started. The risk assessment is fairly straightforward and free, and we'd be happy to help you talk through and learn about how to use CloudKnox as it exists today. Multi-cloud, it really helps you kind of solve three problems. One is get some visibility into where your permissions have been granted and where they're actually being used, and we help you reduce that permissions gap. And then we have a whole set of features that help you with remediation, going out to essentially give you just enough permissions, both on demand, also and via service integration as well. So I'd love to encourage everyone who's curious today, go try the product as is, and that will be available for the foreseeable future. I will say we are working on integrating both the people and the product into Microsoft, and as you might imagine, that takes some time. So we're not ready with any announcements today or any clarity on what a roadmap or timing looks like. And I saw a question fly by. We also don't quite have anything to announce in terms of licensing or pricing yet, but know that we're working on it and that we're super happy to have the team inside Microsoft and looking at all the opportunities to integrate the amazing technologies into our full lineup of Microsoft security services.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Tark, back to you. Another way to manage resilience. Hey, why don't we just have two identity providers to manage that for mission critical applications? Any thought about, hey, people are diversifying with the cloud, let's diversify with our identity providers as well?
We've been asked this question by customers, especially when they worry about mission critical apps or apps. Is this better in terms of audio quality? I think this is better. The advice we give them is that when you introduce a second IDP, there's going to be usually two ways of doing it. You can either put them side by side, or you can IDP chain. If you IDP chain, just generally speaking, you're getting the combined SLA of both. So if one is 4 nines and the other one is 4 nines, then the combined SLA is 3 nines and 8. You actually decrease your overall SLA by chaining. Because now either outage on either of them will be a problem. The approach that some have considered is putting them side by side, in which case you're moving the risk into your own application, because now you have to teach your client token acquisition library to go to one IDP, and if it's unavailable, you go to the other one. Instead of failing or showing an error message to the user, you try to teach it to go to the other one. And then you'll have to have some mechanism to maybe synchronize the credentials between the two, which most IDPs are not really desiring to expose their credentials for extraction. And then when you get the token and you send it to the application that's supposed to consume the token, you have to teach that application and the libraries to, consume tokens from an issuer and signed by Azure AD or the other IDP. And so all of this moves the risk into your apps. And so it doesn't result in a safer, more resilient application. We've discussed this at length with other customers. We've tried, architecting custom solutions in certain ways. There are things you can do, but we definitely recommend to increase the resilience of your apps. If you go to aka.ms/Azure Resilience, and we will have a link for it at the end. If you go to that link, there's a section on how you can configure your tenant, with more resilient options, and then there's a section on how you can configure your applications. So on the tenant level, for example, requiring reprompts unnecessarily is generally a bad practice. You should trust sessions on trusted devices and trusted locations. They should just last. You shouldn't try to reprompt artificially to do things like a proof of presence or things like that, unless it's mandated by regulation or something. And on the flip side, in the applications, you can do things like lengthen the tokens of server-to-server apps, for example, so that you don't have to come back every hour to get a token and so forth. So take a look at it when you have a chance.
Great, thank you. Sarah, another question around identity security features. So what's the best way, just in terms of usability, to turn on some of these new CA policies that we've announced?
That is a great question. I think this is also one that when we talk to customers can be tricky to figure out, right? Like historically, this has been a really big question. And frankly, we've seen it be a challenge to actually turn some of these things on when you don't know what's going to happen. So what not to do is to target all users, all apps, and turn it on and just hope that everything's going to work, right? Like we know that most organizations are going to have some edge cases where it won't work for some users, or you need to handhold them to make sure that the policies are going to be tolerable for them. What we do now have, and we've had for a little while now, is report only mode. So highly, highly, highly recommend that for all those policies that we talked about earlier today in the demo, as well as any other conditional access policies that you're exploring turning on, that you use report only to first understand what's going to happen before you enable the policy. We've seen this be really successful with customers who have used it to be able to not only prevent issues from happening before they turn on the policies, but actually speed up their deployment, right? Because then you have the data to be able to show to whomever it is that you need to convince that these policies are the right thing, that it's going to work. So definitely use report only mode. We have in our documentation some best practices around how to configure these policies. So definitely take a look at those. There are some common scenarios that can put you in a sticky situation that we want to avoid. The report only mode is your best friend, especially along with this new overview that we've added to conditional access to help you understand where you have some areas for optimization in your policy configuration. Goes hand in hand with report only mode. So cannot recommend that enough.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Great advice. Steve, and what we're thinking about doing in terms of CloudKnox, will we continue to support multi-cloud data collection as part of our vision for the Microsoft and CloudKnox integration?
Oh yeah, awesome question, Adam. I have heard rumors, or I think there's some fear that now that Microsoft has acquired CloudKnox, that we'll abandon CloudKnox's multi-cloud DNA. And I'm here to reinforce the idea that no, we bought CloudKnox because they are multi-cloud. And when I say multi-cloud, Azure is one of the clouds that we will support, but we are going to meet our customers where they are. We know AWS, GCP, and I will even say on-prem, and there's a whole set of additional long-term work we want to do to bring in all relevant clouds. We want to actually help bring in the data from wherever you're using it. So our mission is to keep CloudKnox multi-cloud. And I think of on-prem in a way as just another cloud, it's just another data source. And you will see us continue to build both the vision for multi-cloud services across Microsoft over the next few years, and CloudKnox is another confirmation that we're all in on multi-cloud. I hope that answered the on-prem question that flew by as well.
Yeah.
Yes, we need to build models where we will do data collection from whatever your source is. And that's our long-term vision.
Sounds good. Thank you, Steve. Tarek, you happen to be not only our resilience expert, you're also our resident passwordless expert too. A thought on MFA. So will Azure AD get better in terms of integrating third-party MFAs, right? Right now, a customer has a problem with autopilot enrollments, getting a third-party MFA prompt, and then later an authenticator prompt when setting up Windows Hello for Business. So any best tips and practices, and a shout out to, there's going to be some awesome passwordless stuff later in Ignite that we'll promote as well.
Yes, thank you, Adam. I think in terms of integrating third-party MFA, we are doing bigger picture work around this that's going to hopefully come to fruition next year later on. Today, the options available to you smoothly are to integrate your third-party MFA with your federation provider so that you're a federated customer using ping or ADFS and so on. And then your third-party MFA solution is plugged in there, and Azure really connects well with that. And that does work, as far as I know, through Windows Hello for Business and Autopilot and so forth. There is there's a gap today where if you're using custom controls and things like that, it doesn't quite work for Windows Hello for Business enrollment, which expects specifically Azure MFA claims and so forth. That is some of the stuff that they're going to be working on next year. However, I would like to use the opportunity to encourage you to consider passwordless options as you start, for example, exploring. So, for example, Windows Hello for Business, we will have functionality coming out early next year around TAP. So you'll be able to issue the user a TAP, and then using that TAP, they can either register. Today, they can register a FIDO credential or phone sign in. With a TAP, they can also start a Windows Hello for Business out of UBI, out of the box experience. So you will give them an autopilot machine, they open, they put in their UPN, and they put in their TAP, and they're able to finish the UBI wizard, finish the Windows Hello for Business wizard, and onboard. That stuff that's coming out. In fact, if you have the insider build of Windows, you can actually see it yourself today, but it's coming to broader availability early next year. But yeah, beyond TAP, I'd like to encourage you to also consider other passwordless, especially tying into the earlier question about MFA from the lock screen. Would love for you to also encourage you to explore FIDO and Windows Hello for Business as ways to do MFA at the lock screen, other than traditionally typing in your password and then getting a phone call to authenticate to the server. I think we're heading in that direction as a company.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tarek. Sarah, a couple questions in the chat around authentication context. So it might be helpful, since we didn't particularly deep dive it at this Ignite, if you want to give like a super high level overview on auth context. And then there was a particular question around maybe some capabilities that we have in the roadmap that you might want to address in terms of ability to, delete an auth context after it's created.
Yes. Thank you, Adam. So definitely still in progress, right? As we continue to march towards general availability, there will continue to obviously be improvements to the service. So there was a question in there about being able to delete, which you cannot do today. That is something that we would consider a GA level, blocker, right? We would definitely not GA that without having that capability within the service. If you're using it today, please continue to give us your feedback, because this is what helps us make sure that we are bringing the best level of quality to this as we GA it. I'm going to put a link in the chat for those of you who may not be available or aware of authentication context. But today you can use this within conditional access policies. So a common scenario that you could use with auth context is if you wanted to use it with MCAS to require step-up authentication. So super, super powerful feature set that we are continuing to iterate on. Again, since it's in a preview state, there's still some bugs that we're working out, but we're excited to hopefully bring it to general availability in the future for all of you.
Great, thank you. Steve, a question. I don't know, this one may or may not be ready for this one, but in terms of CloudKnox working with on-prem, right? We've been talking a lot about multi-cloud. Any concept of extending CloudKnox to on-prem or maybe TBD roadmap?
Yeah, I would say TBD roadmap there's a number of on-prem services, including our own. Azure or Active Directory on-prem is one of our sources for data as well, and we will continue building essentially our Sentry model for on-prem services where we can actually send in data collection VMs and pull data out so that on-prem looks just like another cloud. It is part of our roadmap, and it will remain part of our roadmap as well. Even though we're all in on multi-cloud, we still know that many of our customers are working with, on-prem data, and will be for a long time. And we'll be right there to collect that data and give you the same gap analysis and the same services that CloudKnox provides.
Great, thank you, Steve. Hopefully you guys can hear me. My mute button shows muted, but I think you can hear me. So Sarah, one more question for you as we're starting to wrap up. We we've talked a lot about stuff. We're going to get into deployment in the next 2 weeks and have some exciting additional blogs and context for customers on how to use some of these things. That token theft detection, really exciting to review. Anything that folks can just easy tips that they can go and start leveraging this today in their environment?
Yes, so the token theft detections are both generally available. So if you have them in your environment, and again, these are not super high volume like some of our other detections, because the bread and butter for most attackers are weak passwords and no MFA, right? So that's still going to be the majority of your attacks. You can go and see these token theft detections if you have them. If you do have them for token replay, again, we want to make sure that those existing tokens are revoked. You roll those creds, see if there's been any other damage in your environment, right? What else have they touched? But it's not just token theft that we have to worry about, right? I kind of think about it as you have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you have Sarah's hierarchy of compromise, and token theft is a little higher up there, right? Like most organizations have not addressed the food, shelter, safety needs that are turning on MFA, not having great credentials, right? So even as we worry about some of these evolving types of attacks like token replay, we still need to make sure that we've met our basic needs. So as you go and check for those new detections, also make sure that you have MFA fully deployed and that you have password policies that aren't going to allow your users to have really, really weak passwords. So super excited for everyone to take advantage of these new detections. We also don't want to lose sight of some of the really basic risk mitigation strategies that we have had out there for a long time. We still need to make sure that we're doing those as well.
Great, thank you. I guess I'll give the last word to Tarek. Another passwordless question in the chat. I know you're kind of actively typing a response to it, but if you wanted to tackle that one, and then you could give a great promo for our awesome passwordless session tomorrow.
Yes, tune in to me again. Sorry, me and Imbar. Imbar is leading a session on. Actually, it hopefully partially helps answer the question, which is why is Microsoft promoting passwordless? We're having a hard time with MFA alone. FIDO keys are maybe expensive. So passwordless is generally significantly more secure than MFA and password, and MFA and password is significantly more secure than password. So if you are in an MFA deployment, great, finish. Nobody's saying stop. But if you haven't started an MFA deployment, consider going to passwordless options. If you have an MFA deployment, consider moving your sensitive users and your day-to-day, some of the easier cases that are lower hanging for you, consider to move them to passwordless. So for example, Microsoft is 100% passwordless for information workers that are day-to-day, like the PMs and sales folks and so on. We don't type a password ever. That literally makes us impervious to phishing. Like if I see a credential prompt anywhere, I'm never going to fill it out. In fact, I'm in a private group that actually doesn't even know its password. Like we scrambled our passwords altogether. Think about the win from a security perspective. Now, if you go to the session tomorrow, it's called from Strong to Stronger. If you search on the Ignite site. If you go to that session, you'll see that why passwordless is also intrinsically anti-phishing under the hood. Like there is something being passed in every authentication request back and forth, mathematically, cryptographically, that makes it impossible for someone to be as a man in the middle, which is called the NIST rules verifier impersonation compromise. So if I'm trying to pretend to be Azure AD and I show you something as the end user gets some stuff from you and then turn around and play it back against Azure AD, it will never work mathematically from a FIDO perspective. And you can see why by the protocols and the mathematics. We can show you what gets sent and so forth. The bigger win is actually that there is no password stored even in Azure AD. Like if as more and more websites adopt passwordless, like LinkedIn and so forth, and I don't know, Facebook, everywhere, right? There's nothing stored on their side. The user's biometric is not stored there. The user's PIN is not stored there. And so there's like one of the biggest attack compromise that Sarah can tell you about is breach replay, right? So bad guys don't break into Azure AD, they break into shadynewsite.com, find the password.txt file, and then they play it against us, right? Well, now there's no password.txt file. So, just those are kind of some of the reasons why we're pushing passwordless and we're promoting passwordless. And we understand that not every method is, that's why we ship passwordless phone sign-in and FIDO and Windows Hello for Business, because each of them works very well in a certain scenario. And so this is, they complement each other, right? Windows Hello for Business works really well for your day-to-day laptop, that's Windows. Doesn't help you much with shared kiosk, it doesn't help you much on mobile, for example. Mobile works well in certain scenarios. FIDO keys work very well for like frontline workers and so on. So think about them, because I think that hopefully you agree with us that they're kind of the future.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to our whole team here today. Wanted to give you guys a chance to have a break before you jump into some additional Ignite sessions. I'll just finish with the last couple quick links that we had talked about earlier. So again, first and foremost, apologies for the technical difficulties today. You can go watch Joy's session in crystal clear 1080p high def if you go to ak.ms/ignitejoyc2021. And we invite you to also check out her blog, which goes deeper into the context of each of the things we announced at ak.ms/identityfall2021. And then if you'd love to see all of our presence at Ignite, where you can check out some interstitials, we have some additional breakout sessions, a really exciting deeper dive into security tomorrow. And as Tarek had mentioned, some really cool content around passwordless. Go to ak.ms/identity@ignite2021. Thank you for your time today, guys, and have a great rest of your Ignite.